Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we have lined up for you tonight. A Lethbridge junior girls football coach arrested for child pornography, including the use of AI to create child porn. Plus, First Nations leaders walk out of meeting with the PM, claiming they see a lack of response to concerns they've raised for weeks about Bill C-5. And a new study suggests Lethbridge now has the second highest housing prices in Alberta.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. A Lethbridge junior girls football coach has been arrested for multiple child sexual exploitation offenses, including the allegation that he used AI to make child pornography. Justin Tillery was arrested by Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit on July 16th with help from Lethbridge Police Service. Tillery allegedly used AI to manipulate and sexualize photos of underage girls. The 38-year-old is a coach with both the Lethbridge Rams and Football Alberta U18 women's teams. He has been charged with making, distributing, possessing, and accessing child pornography, along with transmitting an intimate image without consent. Alert says they are currently going through evidence to identify possible victims.
This was a lengthy investigation. It actually dates back to December of last year. What typically happens is we get notifications from the RCMP's Child Coordination Center about suspected child porn being traded on social media platforms. In this case, it was the social media application Kik Messenger. Right now, at this point in the investigation, we have been able to identify 2 victims of this. You can appreciate that they had no idea that this was taking place, that their photos were being used without their consent, without their knowledge, and turned into child pornography. That's going to be incredibly upsetting and a shock to hear. We're working with those 2 victims to provide any supports and resources that they need, but we suspect that we might uncover additional victims as our forensic analysis takes place. As a coach and someone that we count on to kind of mentor and develop our young athletes, yeah, that's going to be really disturbing and a breach of trust. The public plays a huge role in our investigations, and if anyone has any information about this case, they're encouraged to contact their local police, Lethbridge Police, or Crime Stoppers.
Tillery has been released from custody on a number of court-imposed conditions, including those that would prevent him from coaching or interacting with anyone under 18. He is scheduled to appear in Lethbridge Court on August the 8th. Some First Nations leaders walked out of a meeting being held with Prime Minister Mark Carney in Gatineau, Quebec Thursday. These were the first of 3 meetings with Indigenous groups over the major projects legislation calls the One Canadian Economy Act, or Bill C-5, which was passed last month. The law allows Cabinet to quickly grant federal approvals for big industrial projects like ports and pipelines that are deemed to be in the national interest by sidestepping existing laws. The First Nations chiefs who left the meeting say they saw an insufficient response to concerns they'd been raising for weeks, while others said they were cautiously optimistic. However, putting trust in the government is easier said than done.
And it's hard to trust any government after 150 years of broken treaties and broken promises. It's hard to trust a government. And I'm not talking about just the current government. I'm talking about previous governments, be it any party that is voted in. They always have their first interest. Their priorities are about their government first. So my suggestion was this relationship has to be reset the way it was originally intended from the beginning when we signed our treaties, to mutually benefit from the land and its resources, to share the wealth, to share the proceeds of any development project in our territories.
In my territory, the Pathways Carbon Storage Project will probably apply to be a national interest project. I don't think people understand how big this project is. It's almost the size of New Brunswick. For a project this size, the national interest can just be economic, and we got assurances today that it won't be. But just because the carbon is going somewhere doesn't mean it will stay there. The Pathways projects can't be in the national interest unless they can prove the carbon can stay there in the ground for 1,000 years. So it's kind of hard, if stuff is deemed a national interest, certain acts is going to be ignored. Species at Risk Act. I'm Dene. I'm a caribou people. Can you put a cost to that if the caribou was to be gone?
And when we think about the consent of these major projects, we also need to have rights of refusal. We need to be able to say no. And that was one of the questions that we asked today. What is your response going to be if a nation says no to any major project within their region or in their territory? And so major projects, resource extraction, this is a conversation, and we're not against development, but not at the expense of our waters and our lands.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is set to hold talks with Inuit leaders in the Northwest Territories next week. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is criticizing a report into last summer's devastating Jasper wildfire that says her government hindered efforts to fight the blaze that destroyed a third of the Rocky Mountain town site and sent 25,000 people fleeing. Smith says the report and media coverage are, quote, politically motivated and overlook or ignore Alberta's contributions like providing firefighters, equipment, and financial resources.
I think that it is important to understand that this was a federal fire. It took place in a federal park, and it was a Federal Parks Canada response. We stayed on standby awaiting their request for supply and support, which they gave to us, or which they ultimately did end up asking us to do, and we moved into unified command only after the fire had breached Jasper and burnt down 1/3 of it. So I would have liked to have seen two things come out of this report. Number one, a recognition that the reason why we ended up with such tragic circumstances, in part, was because of inappropriate forest management practices that doesn't cut down deadwood trees. And also, I wish that they had realized that they needed to ask for unified command faster, because we were not asked for support until after the town burned down.
Premier Smith is asking for an apology from the town of Jasper. Lethbridge has often boasted low housing prices, but according to a new study, the city now has the second highest housing prices in Alberta, higher than even Edmonton, a city at least 10 times the size of Lethbridge. A report from the Alberta Real Estate Association claims the average house cost in Lethbridge is up 9.3% from last year to just over $439,000, and Edmonton housing costs an average of $431,000, up by 4.7% from this time last year. However, single detached homes still cost $60,000 higher in Edmonton, yet factors such as sales, new listings, inventory, and monthly supply have increased in Edmonton while decreasing in Lethbridge. The owner of Remax in Lethbridge says the city just isn't getting the same supply as other major cities in the province.
I always say at one point we used to talk about the market, and I don't think we can do that anymore. I think we have to talk about certain segments of the market because the conditions change depending on the price range. As far as the conditions we're in, really the only thing that fixes this is more supply. And so I know that we have an unbelievable new home construction builders in Lethbridge. They're great. We just need more of it. And like over the past few years, we've probably been deficient in what we were getting onto the market. And again, it's the only thing that really fixes this. So when you talk about all these other markets, I mean, if you look at Calgary, although Calgary's pricing is still very high, things have cooled off down there. And when I say, so instead of a pitch like this, it's just kind of cooled off. And really, they've got, at one point this year, the amount of listings they had come on was up 100% from where it was the year before. So they're already seeing some different market conditions there. We aren't. We're still having that heavy pitch from supply and demand imbalance.
Calgary still remains the highest priced in Alberta, with an average house costing $585,000. A new study from the Canadian Medical Association Journal says that 1/3 of Canadians are considered obese, and the rise can be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. A cross-sectional study of adults was conducted between 2009 and 2023. Canadian community health surveys, including the body mass index of over 746,000 adults. It shows an increase from 24.95% of adults in 2009 to 32.69% in 2023, with the absolute rate of increase of BMI-defined obesity nearly doubling during the pandemic. Particularly, there was a rise in more cases of severe obesity in young adults and women.
I think the biggest thing we see coming into the store here with my clients coming in is that people are stressed and people aren't coping. And so they're looking for support in that. And so then we'll see when we're not coping, oftentimes we'll choose to emotionally eat. We feel sad or we feel out of control. And so then we will turn sometimes to treats or foods, and we fill ourselves up with that. I almost feel like it's compounding where, yes, we're out of the pandemic, but I don't think people have truly dealt with how they felt, what happened. We're still seeing divisiveness. Like there's still, people are still coming in frustrated. When it comes to weight management, we have to look at blood sugar. And so we have a lot of people coming in asking for blood sugar support. And so with that, we're eating regularly throughout the day. We're eating protein, fiber, which vegetables are great for that, and good fats like your essential fatty acids. That's really, really important. And then we do have that gut-brain connection. So when we look at stress, we need to have good gut health to have good mental health as well. There is a huge link there. And so it is, making sure we're not eating inflammatory foods, getting your good fermented foods. And I always say, eat real foods. Where does this food come from? Do you know what it is? And try and fuel your body with real, healthy, nutrient-dense foods.
The study attributes the pandemic responsible for the adverse changes in the daily lives of Canadians, including sedentary time, physical activity, diet, food insecurity, stress, mental health, and the worsening of many socioeconomic factors, including job loss and higher costs of living. Well, not all stories are told in books. Some are carved in stone. A summer tour at Lethbridge's oldest cemetery invites visitors to discover the city's past, one grave at a time. Our BCN's Heidi Echeverria was on the cemetery tour and has this story.
And this is a tour of biographies and stories of the people buried here. So we'll learn about some of the earliest people in Lethbridge, and we'll learn a little bit about cemetery symbolism and the stories of our cemetery.
This is the kind of tour that just a few plan to take, but everyone should experience. Every summer for 20 years, the Lethbridge Historical Society has organized special tours. On Thursday, the tour took place at St. Patrick's Cemetery, the oldest in Lethbridge. But many may wonder about the purpose of these tours.
Is to demystify what people think of as cemeteries, to help them understand that a cemetery is a historic place as much as it is a place of remembrance, and that we have a lot of people whose histories we need to remember, and that by coming here and physically walking through the cemetery, you get to experience the history in a very different way. When you understand about things like Superman and superheroes, you need to know the origin story. You need to know the beginning of a community to understand why a community is such as it is today. In many cases, some of the headstones are the only things we have left of people's lives, so we have to protect our cemeteries and make sure they're preserved.
Then the stories come to life. Crosem shares names, biographies, and untold stories of those buried here. One name, one story at a time.
I'm standing in front of the Colehurst mine disaster. This was in 1935, where 16 men were killed. 10 of them are buried here in St. Pat's. The other 6 are buried in Mountain View Cemetery. And so this was the largest coal mine disaster in the Lethbridge area, happening in Colehurst. There's a couple of women out here. There are female entrepreneurs. There's Katie Palin, who made sure that people understood that she never went on welfare, even though she was a single woman through the Great Depression. There is the assistant sheriff buried here, who is a woman. All of these stories are here. Many of the nuns who work so hard at St. Michael's Hospital and in the school system are here. We have, a chief of the fire department who died following fires, didn't die in the fire, but died as a result of the fire from the influenza epidemic of 1918. Frank Greer was the first person buried here.
By learning about each section, Crowson highlights how Lethbridge's multicultural past lives on in a quiet harmony, different yet connected.
While this is called St. Patrick's Cemetery, there is a Catholic portion here, a Protestant portion, and a Chinese portion here. And many of the early stories will go back to our coal mining history, the ranching history. So it tells about the very earliest history and about those residents who tried to make a living here way back in the 1800s.
Although St. Patrick's Cemetery is not one of the oldest in the country, it was established in 1886. It is an essential witness to the Lethbridge's past. Amidst tombstones, flowers, and quiet paths, it tells the story of generations that shaped the city. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Thanks so much, Heidi. That looked like quite the walk through the history there. So peaceful, too. Well, in other news, south of the border, it seems the Jeffrey Epstein files are taking up a lot of energy in the House and elsewhere due to all the back and forth, backpedaling, and lack of transparency. Earlier this week, President Donald Trump praised his Attorney General Pam Bondi for the work she's done on the files, but now he's ordered the release of more documents. Here's a look at how the story has unfolded so far.
Donald Trump first suggested he would declassify the Epstein files during his election campaign, if he won a second term. The records relate to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, who died in jail while facing charges of sex trafficking, and were thought to include Epstein's infamous client list. Attorney General Pam Bondi promised full transparency, saying the new administration would ensure everything is going to come out to the public. In February, far-right influencers were shown mostly already public documents at the White House. In May, Bondi claimed there were tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children. On July 7th, a Department of Justice memo stated they did not have a list of clients and no further files would be released. Trump then downplayed the issue.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking... We have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Since then, Trump has claimed the files themselves were made up by the previous Democratic administration, denying that his name appeared in them.
These files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden
Then Trump doubled down, referring to the files several times as a hoax and criticising his own supporters for falling for it.
I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Trump has since threatened to sue the Wall Street Journal for alleging that he had written a sexually suggestive letter included in a 2003 album for Epstein's 50th birthday. Trump denies writing the letter. He's now ordered the release of some additional documents, subject to court approval.
And in entertainment news, if you're a fan of late-night levity, host Stephen Colbert announced last night that the network is canceling its decades-old Late Show. Here's David Bowder with the Associated Press.
Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending the Late Show in May.
CBS has announced that Stephen Colbert's show, The Late Show, will be ending at the end of next May. The news came as a surprise to a lot of people because in the late night ratings, Stephen Colbert is number one. CBS says that the reasons for this are economic and not because of the content of the show. Even though Stephen Colbert has been a very frequent and loud critic of President Trump, and 3 days before this announcement went out publicly and criticized CBS's parent company Paramount's deal with President Trump to settle a lawsuit. It is true that the late night genre has been declining, has much less revenue than it had 10 years ago. because a lot of viewers are going to streaming services or going online to get some of their late night jokes.
Colbert told his audience last night that this is the end of the Late Show period and that he is not being replaced. Colbert took over for David Letterman in 2015, who had hosted the show for nearly 22 years. Environment Canada has issued a severe thunder watch for southern Alberta. I will be right back with a look at our local and national weather forecast. It was a gorgeous day in Lethbridge today. However, the area is under a severe thunderstorm watch for this evening. So be prepared for some severe weather if you are in the area. These thunderstorms have the potential to develop into large hails, heavy rains, and also strong winds. So remember, when thunder roars, go indoors to keep it safe. Otherwise, looking like after midnight, developing some fog, but those fog patches should dissipate by Saturday morning, making way for a lovely day. High of 26 degrees Saturday, mix of sun and cloud. 21 on Sunday and Monday evening, starting to showers developing into Tuesday's 60% chance of showers on Tuesday with a high of 20 degrees. Back up to 26 Wednesday and 29 on a Thursday. You might want to throw on the air conditioning for that, that's for sure. Average high for this time of year, 26. Average low, 11. 36 was the record high on this day back in 1960 and in 1912. And again in 1962, we saw the record low in Lethbridge, which was only 4 degrees. Sun rose this morning at 5:43 a.m. and our sun set this evening, 9:31 p.m. So 15 hours, 48 minutes of daylight is what that looks like, 2 minutes shorter than yesterday. Fairly clear skies in Victoria tomorrow, high of 20 degrees. In Vancouver, 30% chance of showers on Saturday, 21 degrees there, high of 20 in Edmonton. Edmonton, heavy rains tomorrow, 10 to 20 millimeters of it. Could see a thunderstorm as well. Calgary this evening is under a severe thunderstorm watch, just like Lethbridge is. And then tomorrow they're going to see a 30% chance of showers. Could see some thunderstorms tomorrow as well. High of 21 in Calgary tomorrow. Looking to the rest of the prairies in Saskatoon, we'll see a high of 21 degrees, 30% chance of showers. Could see some showers also in Regina, high 23. Widespread smoke is what's expected tomorrow in Winnipeg, with a high of 26 degrees. So still feeling the effects of those wildfires. As we get into the central part of the country though here, Toronto seeing a high of 28 degrees, mix of sun and cloud. Humidex 31, same thing for Ottawa, 28, but feeling like 31 with that humidex. And then Montreal, high of 28 degrees with clear skies there. As we look into Atlantic Canada, get over to the Maritimes here. Fredericton, high 27, clear skies. Same thing in Halifax. Charlottetown, 1 degree less than that, high of 26, but a lovely day, clear skies, and a beautiful 25 degrees in St. John's with clear skies, feeling more like 20 by the water there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. The head of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers says if a vote on Canada Post's latest contract offer passes next week, it tells the Crown Corporation that it's acceptable to ignore free and fair collective bargaining. Union National President Jan Simpson is urging workers to reject the offer ahead of next week's vote, led by the Canada Industrial Relations Board. The board was asked to step in last month by Federal Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu. Canada's Post Vice President of Communications and Stakeholder Engagement says the vote is only about one thing, which is the best and final offers put forth for both bargaining units, rural and urban. Canada could add an estimated 30,000 more housing starts annually by eliminating interprovincial trade barriers. That's what Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says in its new analysis. It says that would push the total number of annual housing starts close to 280,000 over time, which would help fix the country's housing supply gap. It comes as the Liberal government has passed an omnibus bill that reduces federal restrictions on interprovincial trade while speeding up permitting for large infrastructure projects. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 72 points on the day to finish at 27,314. The Dow was down 142 to 44,342. The S&P 500 was down 0.57 to 6,296, and the Nasdaq was up 10 points to 20,895. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 20 cents to $67.34 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 3 cents to 3.56 US. Gold was up 10.77 to 33.49.51 US an ounce, and silver was up 7 cents to 38.16 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.89 per bushel, barley is at $6.53, canola is at $15.81, and corn is at $7.41 per bushel. Live cattle were down 12 cents to $223.55. Feeder cattle were down $1 to $3.24. Lean hogs were up 65 cents to $106.47. All of those contracts are for August. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $72.90 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Lethbridge junior girls football coach Justin Tillery has been arrested for multiple child sexual exploitation offenses, including the allegation that he used AI to make child pornography. Tillery has been released from custody on a number of court-imposed conditions, including those that would prevent him from coaching or interacting with anyone under 18. He is scheduled to appear in Lethbridge court on August the 8th. Production in various industries in Canada has slowed down in recent years, leading to stagnation and a slump in the incomes of Canadians. Philip Cross, former chief economic analyst with Stats Canada, says that he will talk about this and how increasing production in Canada will turn our slump into a bump. That's all coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and our interviews.
In recent years, inflation-adjusted incomes have slumped in Canada, accompanied by a stagnation in productivity. What is all behind this? Well, joining us today to shed some light on this topic is Philip Cross. He spent 36 years at Stats Canada, the last few years as its chief economic analyst. He is a senior fellow of the Fraser Institute and the author of a new study entitled Higher Labor Productivity is the Key to Faster Income Growth. Philip, it's great to have you with us today. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So first of all, can you tell us to what degree are we seeing a slump in Canadian incomes, and how long has this been going on for?
Well, Canadian incomes have slumped, especially over the last decade. I mean, there's been a persistent slowdown since the mid-90s. That was the last time we had a big boom in our in income growth that was comparable to the heady days after World War II. But we've really struggled over the last decade. And what's notable is that isn't inevitable. You can't blame it all on aging or, some, the legacy of the great financial crisis, things like that, because our next door neighbors in the U.S. have done quite well.
Right.
You wouldn't know it from listening to the tenor of the discussion there. And, there are issues about income distribution down there and so on that I'm not going to get into. But the point is that, especially driven by the Magnificent Seven, their big technology stocks, they've been able to sustain the income growth, whereas we don't have any global leaders anymore. We used to have Nortel and Research Motion, BlackBerry, and our technology leaders have fallen by the wayside, and nobody stepped up to replace them. And as a result, and our resource sector has slumped over the last decade as well. So we haven't had anybody championing growth and driving growth in this country, and as a result, our overall growth has suffered.
Now, your study involves talks about higher labor productivity. Can you just define what you mean by the term labor productivity?
Yeah, well, it's output per hour. I mean, it's why is it a good thing? It's somebody asked me that recently, and I said, well, it's the benefits of higher labor productivity are like, a high school kid who's able to do their homework faster. The faster you can do it at the same with no loss of quality, the more time off you have for doing whatever you want, social media, sports, and so on and so forth. It's the gift that just keeps on giving. So if you have higher productivity, you're going to have higher incomes, and you're going to reap all the benefits from that. So the stagnation of productivity in recent years has been a problem.
And how do you calculate income? Is it just wages or are other benefits included?
That's a very good point. A lot of people arrive at the wrong conclusions in this subject pick the wrong measure of wages, and that is if you just look at variables like average hourly earnings or weekly earnings, which my former colleagues at StatCan produce, you're going to understate wage growth because, and it's not surprising, with an aging population, more and more workers in our society want to take their benefits in the form of higher pension benefits, higher health benefits. And so we've seen much more rapid growth in compensation in these areas. You remember even bonuses. You remember during the COVID pandemic, that employers were offering retention or hiring bonuses to people. So if you just take a simple measure of wages as hourly earnings or weekly earnings, you're going to miss out on some of the more dynamic areas of compensation. And as a result, you're going to understate what income growth has been in recent years.
And it seems like it makes basic sense that if Canada boosts its productivity, then we should see growth in our income levels. But apparently there are those who argue that income and productivity are not linked. So how would you respond to those critics?
Well, the way I respond is that they're looking at the wrong variable. That say most of the time when people make mistakes in this area, and the people who claim that incomes have been lagging productivity consistently make this mistake. They take a narrow measure of wages. And as I say, they miss out on these areas of compensation that have shown the most growth. So if they take the most comprehensive measures of labor compensation produced by Statistics Canada, they would have arrived at a different conclusion. And the conclusion is that productivity and incomes have arrived in lockstep. That's a very important conclusion because it says that to fix our income problem, we need more productivity. And that means you're going to adopt a whole range of policies, such as higher business investment, that are going to be quite different than what these people recommend. People who say that incomes have lagged productivity, therefore say we need to concentrate in redistributing incomes, and they end up advocating a whole bunch of policies that in fact end up hampering overall productivity growth and hence income growth for everyone. So this is a very important issue. I mean, it may sound esoteric and technical to some of your viewers, but it's one that's really important to get right, because if you don't get it right, you'll go down a completely erroneous road in terms of what policies you're going to advocate.
Wow, that does sound really important. And you write that the temptation for governments would be to implement a socialist approach and try to redistribute income or offer tax rebates to offset lower worker incomes. But that would likely impact the economy negatively, wouldn't it?
Impact negatively, certainly if you're going to, we just talked earlier in this interview about how we haven't had any champions step up over the last 10 years. And that's one thing that's, quite different between Canada and the US. You look at the US where growth is being driven by these technology companies, NVIDIA, Google, Apple.
Right.
And, we talked about how, yes, it's driven higher. It's driven a lot of people have made a lot of money on this. That's something to be encouraged. I mean, Canada's problem isn't that rich people are taking too much of the income. It's that we don't have enough rich people. I wish we had more rich people who are earning more income. It would help drive overall incomes higher. So, if you end up focusing on redistribution, you're going to depress growth. But other, even conservative governments in this country, like here in Ontario, Doug Ford government was elected earlier this year, partly because they gave out $200 a person goodies right in the middle of the election. I mean, that's wonderful for getting reelected. I guess it worked. Bribing people with their own money often does. But it doesn't do anything to address Canada or Ontario's productivity problem in the long term. We would have been better off, instead of just one-time tax rebates, we would have been better off if we had reconfigured the tax system in a way that encouraged more business investment, for example, or improved our export competitiveness. So It's I would call these tax rebates gimmicks and that don't boost growth in the long run, and redistribution policies as actually outright harmful to productivity and the growth in the long term.
Now, I want to talk about these champion companies that have sort of like gone by the wayside in the past. Like, what do you see in the future? Do you see like champion companies that could be coming into the spotlight soon? I mean, like even here in southern Alberta, it seems like this would be a great place for technology to expand with our abundance of energy, like whether it is coal or solar or wind, making southern Alberta a very affordable place to invest in if you're a technology company.
Well, I'm not discouraged about Canada's fundamental ability to generate income growth, to generate the next leaders. I'm certainly not going to predict individual companies, but Canada has, as recently as 20 years ago, we had a dozen amongst the 100 leading companies in the world. Today we have one, Shopify. So,
Wow.
but I don't think we've become stupid all of a sudden. We have. If you look at what are Canada's advantages, we're a huge country, so we're a cold country. Hard to believe right now in mid-July, but so we've developed advantages in long-distance communications. We've always been good at Bell and Nortel and research in motion. We've always been good at the long-distance transmission of energy. Hydro-Quebec pioneered that. Our pipeline companies are world beaters. We're very good at transportation. Our 2 of the 5 largest rail companies in North America are Canadian. So we should concentrate on what we're good at. For government trying to force feed, trying to decide ahead of time, well, we're going to specialize in green energy. That's the wrong way to do it. Let's do what we've always been good at: energy, transportation, communications, especially over long distances, infrastructure. We're good at all these things. We've been good at all these things in the past, and that's probably where we're going to excel in the future. And I'm not discouraged about Canada regaining some leadership in the technology sector either. As I said, we have a history there with Nortel and research in motion. I don't think that is imprinted in our DNA, and it didn't disappear just because we've had a few bad years and, frankly, some really bad governments.
Right, and I remember even technology-wise, the auction site eBay originally was Canadian. But how does Canada compare with other OECD nations in the area of productivity?
Quite badly compared to the U.S., and that's the most important one, because our young people growing up here, they have an easy alternative in the U.S. And if they continue to see income stagnate and housing become unaffordable and job opportunities limited here, it's natural they're going to look first to the U.S. I don't think it's enough. Our productivity performance has been probably comparable to that in Europe and Japan, but I don't think we should be patting ourselves in the back too much for that. Europe itself and Japan have both had very long term. We've had a problem over a decade. These regions have had a problem for several decades now in the case of Japan. So being as good as Japan and Europe isn't really anything to crow about. It means that we're lagging behind the U.S. like everyone else, and meanwhile, some up-and-coming middle-income countries are increasingly catching up to us, such as South Korea, for example, and Brazil, some of these fast-growing middle-income countries. So we can't be complacent, or because if we continue to stagnate, we'll be the next Argentina rather than recapturing what Argentina is a good example of. There's a country that had a promising beginning, lots of resources. On paper, they have everything. And they've just frittered it all away with some terrible policies in recent decades.
Right. And what can we learn from these other nations that you've listed? And what can we do in Canada to increase productivity? And what kinds of changes do we need? And how long would it take for these changes to produce growth in income?
Yeah. Well, so I think we should concentrate on areas where traditionally we have been good. You can't survive in this country without energy. Energy, we're the number, people have often talked about, we're the number one energy per capita consumers in the world. And it's because we're such a dark, cold place and we have to travel great distances. As a result, we've had to be very good at energy because without it, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't survive in this country. We have a comparative advantage in energy, and yet we've done everything possible over the last decade to discourage growth in many sectors of of energy, notably oil and gas, but also pipelines. The opportunities were there. The Americans took advantage of them, and we didn't. So I think there are some instances of where we could have more growth that are right under our nose. But apart from that, I think though, I think we're past the point where tinkering with policies at the edge is going to help things. I think we're at the point now after a decade that we have to re-examine how we communicate and talk to the business sector. We have to stop this reflex of looking to, every time we have a problem, of looking to government, and especially my former colleagues in Ottawa, because I'll guarantee you, after 36 years in the federal government, if you're looking for the federal government to come up with innovative and creative solutions, you're going to be disappointed. So we have to stop looking to government to solve all our problems. We need to look at, for example, in the healthcare sector, it's not enough to just keep throwing more money into healthcare. At some point, we have to be saying to ourselves, how can we get the business community involved to help solve our healthcare problems? And until we start approaching things like that, I think we're going to continue to have problems.
Sounds like you hit the nail right on the head with those last few comments there. Philip Cross is a senior fellow of the Fraser Institute and the author of the study, Higher Labor Productivity is the Key to Faster Income Growth. Philip, great to have you with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we all get excited when a relative or friend decides to get married, but there's usually an incredible amount of work and planning that goes into it. Usually that means stress as well. And today's guest is an expert on these kinds of things and joins us from Medicine Hat, Alberta. Kim Friesen is a wedding planner and the owner of Weatherwood Events. Good to have you with us today, Kim. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to join you.
Planning for weddings certainly can be stressful. There are so many details. Where do you start? Do you need to look at the big picture first, set a budget and a date?
Yes, every client that I speak with, we start with budget. And that's the most important thing because everything reflects off what their budget is. So for sure, when you start working with me, that's the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is your budget for this wedding?
What if you don't know? It's like, gee, I don't know. I've never been married before. I've never been engaged. I don't know where to start. Do you kind of help them do you ask questions to just sort of guide them to what a good budget might look like?
Yes, and I can outline some of the basics, like your venue costs, your food costs, what kind of food do you want? And then I start to show them what their budget will look like. And really it's about finding what's your maximum and then we go from there. And then we have to get creative sometimes,
Yeah, it's
which
like,
is
how much
fun.
are you willing
Yeah.
to spend? How much debt are you willing to go into over this? And yeah, no, exactly. How far in advance should couples be booking the wedding and reception venues?
We're seeing things really change. Actually, post COVID, I have clients that are booking up to 2 years in advance. I also did a wedding in March. We only had 3 months. So it can be done. It's just you have to be flexible. Are you flexible with your dates? Are you flexible with your venue? But if there's particular venues and a particular date you want, then for sure a year in advance is a great place to start.
Wow. Okay. So if it's an outdoor wedding, of course, these can always be iffy. So what are some of the key points in planning something like this?
Well, we are in southern Alberta, so always having a secondary plan if you haven't booked tents.
With a
Then you
windshield,
also have
right?
to, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I have taken weddings down and put them back up half an hour before reception start because of wind. So you just have to, there's a lot of things to take into consideration with weather, power. Do you have power supply? adequate washrooms, prep tents for your catering. There's lots of little details with outdoor weddings. And I think a lot of clients feel like they're going to save money by being outdoors. And in actuality, sometimes it can become more expensive. So something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so decisions need to be made for who will be in the wedding party and what they will be wearing, including the bride and groom. So any advice on this?
Yeah, usually when a client begins working with me, they've already picked their colors. They've already picked their wedding party. That's kind of
Ooh.
the first thing most
Well,
clients
they were
do. So
well
then
ahead of
when
me
I'm
then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of girls, a lot of clients have been thinking about this since they were little. And so they've got those things in their head. So just advice is to make everything cohesive. So if you've already picked your color palette, then your whole wedding should reflect that. And most girls do, but yeah, good start point.
Oh, that's great. So one of the challenging things, of course, can be deciding who to invite and who not to, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I think a lot of girls feel pressure from people once they find out they're getting married. They feel this pressure that they want to invite them as well, or even from guests that they want to be invited. And so I always recommend a list A and a list B. And so your list A is your must-haves. And if you're having a small wedding, that the list B is great because then as you get RSVPs that maybe they're declining to attend, you can go to the next list and start adding people in. But I think because we're seeing such a huge increase in pricing of food, of like literally everything, your flowers, everything, stick to your limit. And if you've hired a planner, we've gone over your budget. We know already what your budget's going to accommodate, how many people, stick to it.
Wow. Okay, good advice there. What are some key points in deciding on food for the reception? You mentioned the price of food now going up, but
Yeah,
something
I
to
mean, and you
consider.
can choose buffet and plated, and I've seen some really creative ideas out there. Food trucks is a great idea. I've done a brunch wedding, which really decreased the food costs. We've done pizza parties. One client did a taco bar. Like, there's lots of really creative things you can do if you can get away from the idea of a really fancy plated meal. So that also helps with staying in your budget.
Okay. What about lining up the right photographer and a videographer and finding the right time and place for wedding pictures? So many things.
So many details. Yeah. And your photographer really is another important part of your decision. My recommendation is always to go on their Pinterest board or their Instagram or their Facebook and see what their style is, because every photographer has a unique editing style. Some photographers edit really dark photos. Some photographers edit really bright, really colorful. So you have to kind of choose what style you like. And then it's really important to meet with them face to face. Do you feel chemistry between the two of you? Are they energetic? Do they give you ideas? Because unless you're really good at positioning yourself for photos and you have a lot of creative ideas, that should be guided by your photographer. So that initial meeting with them is super important for a client.
Okay, good advice. So hiring a wedding planner is an extra expense, of course, but obviously some people believe it is well worth it. Now, you're a wedding planner yourself, so you might be a little biased on this one, but what are your thoughts?
Selling wedding planning is probably hardest because you don't know you need it until after. Um, my biggest point to a client is that when you're investing 20,000 and more, it's worth enjoying your investment. So a wedding planner alleviates the stress, takes all the details off your plate. You can just enjoy all the extras you have to do. But I also will save clients a lot of money. I have great connections. I've done hundreds of weddings, so I know what is necessary, what isn't. Make sure that you have all the details in place. It's not only an investment in having a stress-free wedding, it's also an investment in saving you money, which is a hard sell when you have to pay for a planner. But I'm there to, if we have weather issues, it's my decisions that will take over. You don't have to worry about it. I have hemmed bridesmaids' dresses. I have made quick boutonnieres. I'm just there to handle all the extras that come up in a wedding.
Yeah, I know for me, Pinterest and Etsy were basically my wedding planners. I did everything myself. So I use those as great inspirational tools for sure, but I could have certainly used some expert advice for sure. So what got you motivated to start an event planning business like this?
I was working as an executive assistant. One of my main roles was to help plan her business parties and events. She had several businesses that she owned. And then it just morphed into more administration. And I did that for about 7 years. And then my daughter got married. And I've done planning. I can do this. I planned her wedding and I found that I missed out so much of her day. I was so busy taking care of all the details. And looking back, it was a huge regret for me. I didn't just relax and enjoy her day. I was making sure everything was getting set up. And then I get a text, please come up. We want to zip up her dress. I just missed so much of her day. And so I did a little bit of research, found it was an area that was missing in our Medicine Hat and Southern Alberta area. And so I took some courses, got some training, did my business plan, and dove in. And it's been a really great career. I love it. I love working with my clients. I love the day. It's a party. It's just a really positive business to be involved in. So,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful for you. It's sad that you missed out on some of those key moments of her wedding. And yeah, no, I totally understand with having, things. I mean, like things do happen on wedding days, right? And people forget things, something breaks or it gets misplaced. So do you think it's essential to have someone assigned to oversee things and to have maybe that so-called runner at the ready to go get things?
Well, as a wedding planner, yes. If you absolutely cannot hire a wedding planner, there's lots of other options. Even having me come on board to help you plan. There's those kind of options available for girls if they can't actually have somebody at their day. And if that's the case, I would highly recommend point people and get yourself together a little kit of how to deal with emergencies like hemming and flowers that are coming apart and all those kind of things. But have a point person so that you as the bride or even as the bride's family don't have to handle the things that come up. One of the things that we don't remember is that if it's your wedding or your daughter's wedding or your son's wedding, you are so emotionally invested in the day. It's sometimes hard to step back and handle an emergency quickly and efficiently, which is something a wedding planner does because I'm not emotionally impacted by the day. So I can make those quick decisions and I can sit down and come up with a plan of how are we going to handle this. And yeah, I think it's well worth the money, but like he said, I'm a little bit biased.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. Okay, so back to the basics here. Any thoughts on wedding decor or colors or choosing wedding flowers?
Oh my goodness, like you said, Pinterest, it's our planner.
Yeah,
And
it was my best friend.
oh, absolutely. And it can be your worst enemy too. So that's the other thing I tell girls. As soon as we've decided on what your decor is going to be like, we don't look at Pinterest anymore because then there's just so many ideas. It overwhelms you. But to keep your wedding cohesive, have your fonts matching, have your colors matching, have it go throughout your whole day is the piece of advice I would give girls when they're planning their wedding. And just there's lots of trends and trends will always change because we're always trying to keep our market, right? So this is your day. Make this a day that you love. That's about you and your partner. And yeah, just everybody else will have their opinion. So
Good advice there. Also, maybe like remembering to get your marriage license. Again, get the clergy, the officiants lined up. There's a lot of details.
yes, there is. And that's really important. You can get your marriage license up to 3 months in advance. Make sure you have pieces of ID. Make sure you know your parents' names, maiden names, and that both of you have to be there. So those are just, some little details about your marriage license. And also with your clergy, whoever you are going to hire, whether it's an officiant or a clergy, or I know a lot of girls are choosing that officiant for a day. Again, make sure that you've met them face to face and you feel compatible. That's the most important for me, my opinion. The most important part of your day is your ceremony. You're covenanting together for life. So make sure the person is, you feel comfortable with them, that they can make it personal for you. And just that face-to-face with them beforehand is really important.
We're about out of time here, but really quickly, any final advice for those planning a wedding in the next while?
Hire a wedding planner. My best piece of advice. Yeah, we'll save you money and we'll give you a great day. And just to remember that it's your wedding day and you're going to get so many opinions, and it doesn't matter because this is your day and you want to remember it as something that really reflected you as a couple, reflected your love story. That's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give.
Great advice. Thanks so much for your expertise today, Kim. Great having you on.
It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Kim Friesen is a wedding planner and owner of Weatherwood Events in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here. Thanks so much for watching.